All right, can everyone hear me? I want to make sure we get everything good to go right before we get started here. Microphone check. 1 2 1 2. All right, great. Okay, so we have sound. Sound is good to go. I'll get started here in one moment once we start getting everybody in here. All righty. Looks like we have 5 people on the live stream so far. Good morning. My name is Wes. I'm with Fourth Sun Gardening. Um, Today, what we'll be talking about is biodiversity or companion planting and planting in small spaces or maximizing your space and plant spacing. Um, just for your information, there will be a presentation that'll be available with all the resources we discuss during this Q&A. Uh, they'll be It should be ready about 30 minutes after we conclude for the day. Um, I imagine this may take about 30 minutes to do this live stream. So thank you for coming out, and I hope I'll be able to answer most of your questions or be able to point you to whichever resources to be able to answer your questions. Um, as I said before, my name is Wes Williams. I'm 43 years old. I'm a military retiree. I retired from the Army after 20 years, but I've been gardening for probably in different capacity for probably about 30 or 40 years. I grew up around the garden. Both sets of grandparents were into agriculture. Um, my grandfather on my mother's side had a huge garden, rather a farm. He raised animals, always planted crops. Um, and I was always out there with him. Even as I was little, my mother, she always had a garden. So, gardening's in my blood. Like people say, I'm not new to this, I'm true to this. Um, so, over the past 5 years since I retired, I originally had a house down in Kyle. I started down there and started testing a few new techniques on how to garden. I learned about hugelkultur and started uh, experimenting on how to set up my beds as not a full hugelkultur, but what I would say express hugelkultur. Instead of taking big chunks of wood and burying that in the ground, I took wood chips and then did the layers like that. Um, but also, I started experimenting with plant spacing and companion planting in order to maximize the space that I did have. Because at that time, I only had maybe a 25 by 10 foot space that I could garden in. But also, as being I was in the military, I had also been experimenting with making the most out of planter boxes. So this is me today coming to you to try and share whatever knowledge I've gained with with all of my time in gardening. Um, I believe the comments are a little bit delayed, but I have them coming up on my phone and I'm on a computer out here. So if you have any questions, if you want to start off with any questions ahead of time, go ahead and put those in the comments. And as I go back and forth, I'll try and answer all your questions. But for anyone who may have any questions about like what biodiversity is, uh, a more scholarly answer for it is biodiversity is the variety of life in the world or in the environment or ecosystem. basically, the larger number of plant species you have, the greater a variety of crops you can have, and that improves the ecosystem productivity. Um, and greater species diversity ensures natural sustainability. Um, and how we do that in the garden, a lot of times, and it also provides other benefits, is companion planting. And that's basically putting different crops in proximity of each other, uh, and that helps you. It provides benefits for pest control, pollination, providing habitats for beneficial insects. That's either pollinators or natural predators. I notice in my yard, I have a lot of bees coming in now. Last year in this yard, hardly saw any bees the whole season. I'm seeing a ton of bees, small toads and frogs. And then during the warmer part of the year, I've noticed what they call the predatory wasp carrying away pest pest insects from off some of my plants. So planting a wide variety of plants actually helps your garden. It helps reduce the usage of pesticides and herbicides, because those plants work together to keep each other alive, basically. Um, my system here is not perfect, but it takes time. And that's one thing I really want to stress about to a lot of gardeners is to have patience. You start putting these systems in and they eventually start to benefit you. Um, in our current situation, which I call it a mutated zoonotic disease, which has collapsed our current society. Um, there's a few things that we want to do, which is we want to get maximum results while weeding out necessary effort. Because I know most of us, we want to garden, but like myself, I also have a family, I also have a job. So during the week, I'm working from home. We got both the kids here at the house, plus we have a house to take care of. So we've got a lot of things to do along with gardening. So if we can make gardening easier for ourselves, the better. Um, and one of the things that we want to do in um, gardening in a societal collapse type situation, this lockdown type situation, is gardening in order to provide food for at least one adult. You know, that's your metric. One adult person for a specific period of time, whether that be a week, a month, or even a year. And that's a homesteading principle. Um, Gardening in order to provide food for one person for a certain amount of time. And in this situation, you want to be able to do that with the minimal support from modern infrastructure. So you want to be able to still garden and garden successfully without without possible electricity or regular running water. So some of the principles or some of the techniques that I'm going to discuss here will go over how to make that happen, as well as a few other techniques. There are a few sets of principles that I follow when gardening. Some of them I've been following for a while. Some of them I just discovered over the past couple of years. But excuse me. One of them is called natural farming. I learned this from the book, The One Straw Revolution. And what he talks about is that the human cultivation of soil, plowing or tilling, is unnecessary. Um, Pardon me one moment. We've got some loud noise. I don't know if you can still hear me. Apologize for that interruption. Um, I'm not, like I said, I'm not there with the absolute avoidance of human cultivation of the soil, But what I have started doing is using no-till methods. I actually have a tiller. I haven't used it in probably about 2 or 3 years. I've never used it in this yard. What I tend to do is I'll select the spot, and the way I prepare my beds is I lay out cardboard on top of the soil, and that suppresses the grass or other weeds. And then I build my beds up on top of it, and then add in my garden amendments into that bed. And what happens over time is the cardboard breaks down, and then the amendments also begin to work that soil along with the uh, any insects or worms. They go ahead and work that soil and break down that clay soil and whatever vegetation was underneath the cardboard. So that's how I have been working with this, with the avoidance of plowing or tilling in my yard, to try and maintain the soil food web. Um, One of the other principles is to avoid using prepared fertilizers, um, and uh, the author also mentioned, also trying to avoid preparing compost. Of course, I'm crazy about preparing compost. I have a whole side of my garage that's nothing but prepared compost. I even have a pile of prepared compost. So, like I said, some of these things you may want to strive for, but there are good things to try and reach for, but it will take time in order to get your garden to a space where you can actually avoid using machines or prepared fertilizers. Um, he also mentioned weeding. Weeding by either cultivation or herbicides is unnecessary. Instead, only minimal weed suppression. That can actually be done with using certain no-till methods, or what they call the back to Eden methods, where you either put out wood chips across your whole garden area, and also you use heavy mulching or composting. That way you bury those weed seeds and they don't come up, they don't have a chance to germinate and sprout in your garden. Um, I already mentioned applications of pesticides or herbicides. Like I said, some of us are not there yet. I'm definitely not there yet. I do have one bed that I haven't really had to use any type of herbicide. I don't use herbicides at all. I use techniques to try and that prevents that from happening, prevent weeds from coming up, which is the heavy mulching, and composting, and also planting my plants close together. Um, I only use natural pesticides, or I use physical methods of trying to remove the pest animals. Uh, for instance, I use Castile soap, neem oil, things of that nature, or just strong blast of water to get the insects off my plants. Uh, and then also, like I said, the companion planting the right plants next to your other crops will also help reduce the need for pesticides. Um, so, does anyone have any questions? Let me see. Marcus, I've been reading, learning about permaculture gardening. That's the method you use for seeds, and you plant it this week. Yes, a lot of these principles that I'm going over, they are the same principles that permaculture gardeners use as well. Um, Lisa, would you dig, till, drop compost or kitchen scraps into the ground to decompose? I've done both. I have right now. I have the. I don't know if you remember my last live video that I posted. I actually posted it into the group. I have a pile over in the corner of my yard. Um, I didn't actually dig down into the ground for this one, but what I did is, now that the pile is a little bit bigger, what I ended up doing is I dug down to the very bottom of the pile to the original soil. And now what I've been doing is dropping yard waste into that. And eventually what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse one of those mini windrows on top of all that compostable material so it can break down. Uh, but usually nowadays I usually hardly ever dig into the natural soil itself. I'll usually build up on top of the original soil. I know I'm going through a lot of stuff, so if I'm going too fast, let me know. Drop something in the comments so I can see, or if I need to revisit a certain topic. Um, what I'm about to do now, I'm gonna start talking about some of the square foot gardening principles, which kind of combines not only companion planting but also efficient plant spacing. Um, I try not to use that term, the square foot gardening, because I know that is copyrighted. Um, but being that we're not, I guess, to say, profiting from this Q&A, I'll use it just for now, so you understand where I'm getting this information from. Um, just so you know, the 10 principles of square foot gardening are plant densely and don't waste space. As I know, if you look in a regular, I guess you can say, modern agricultural space, they have rows, and there's a lot of space, land space in between each row, and usually a lot of space in between each plant. And square foot gardening, you try and plant as close as possible. Plant each plant is, I'm sorry. You try and put each plant in the ground as close as possible to the next plant to maximize space. Um, the second principle is to grow up and not out. Instead of using more and more land, you try and use less space and then move up if possible. Um, one of the principles that I use already is make your own growing medium. What I tend to do is, and I also find it to be cheaper, as I go to local landscaping supply places. I've mentioned Organics by Gosh because that's close to me in the past, and I get a different mixture of garden amendments, compost, sand, um, and mulches, the extremely broken down mulch, and I mix that together. And usually, the only time I may go to a big box store is to get something like perlite to try and to provide the aeration for that soil. And then I'll also mix in. I usually find a local organic plant fertilizer, and I'll mix that into my soil, and use that, mix that up, and use that in my plants here in the yard. Um, because a lot of times you can go and buy some of these mediums, and they may not have exactly what you need in that soil, or it may be used with a man-made fertilizer that it'll give your plants a quick boost of food, but it won't be a sustained. It won't provide sustained nutrients. Garden close to home, meaning best way to maintain a garden and keep it going and maintain your interest in that garden is to put it close to home. Like I have garden beds that are right outside my back door. We had a walkway right outside, so the spaces in between the house and the walkway, I've turned all those into beds. Uh, Maybe after I go through all this, I'll walk through and let you guys see how that garden looks. Matter of fact, since we're outside, I'm going to turn this around real quick so you can see the beds. Hoping that you can see those beds out there. That's so you can walk outside. You can not only harvest quickly, but you can just look outside your window and see, hey, okay, this needs some care. But if you see it, you're going to take care of it. So if it's close to you, you're going to take care of it. That's the idea in growing close to home. Grow shallow. No need to till and double dig. And that I talked about that a minute ago. It's not necessarily growing shallow because we know that some plants do need a little bit more space, root space, in order to grow down. Uh, but what, like I said, what I do is I build on top of the current soil and let the amendments and the garden, the soil creatures, basically till that underneath my garden bed over time. Um, in square foot gardening, the next principle is fertilizer not needed. Um, like I said, in building your growing medium, if you do it the way that I do, I add plant food into my soil. So initially, you don't really need fertilizers that often. What you can do is occasionally add a quick boost, or if you're regularly adding compost and mulch to your soil, to your garden soil, then all of that is going to eventually break down and provide nutrients for your plants. Keep the aisles narrow. Like I said, we are trying to maximize space. So if don't plant your garden beds too far apart if possible. Um, Plant them close together. What I do is I'll put down. What I did is I put down one bed and then I put my lawnmower in between it to try and measure out that space, and then I plan the next bed from there. And then once I learned how much space my lawnmower required to move in between each bed, that's how far I planted my garden beds apart. Now, in between my larger beds, my 4x4 beds, I don't necessarily need to run the lawnmower in between there because I have wood chips and a heavy layer of leaves in between all my beds. Um, be stingy with seeds, especially in this time when a lot of seed companies are sold out. You know, you don't want to just plant a bunch of seeds and then thin them. That's basically, it's wasting seeds. It's wasting your plants. Those are plants that you could have used to feed yourself or your family over time instead of doing that. So, what it says, be stingy with seeds, no planting and thinning for economy and efficiency. Read that seed packet. Read the back of the seed packet. A lot of times they'll tell you how much space you need in between each plant. So what you do, you take those seeds and you plant them at that interval. Sometimes you may need to put like one or two seeds within a hole to make sure that you have success at each site. But you don't want to just scatter a bunch of seeds, especially in these times when seeds are scarce, um, to be able to plant properly. Plant in squares. Um, what I do is I have a little grid system. It's a little metal grate that has what I want to say. It is 1 square inch spaces in a 1 square foot grid, and I plant into those. I put that down on the ground and I plant my seeds in there. And then lastly, you want to rotate your crops. So if possible, every year move. If you're planting, for instance, uh, I'm sorry, if you're planting uh, squash in this bed this year, then you may want to put those squash in a different bed the next year. That'll keep whatever pest insects from just hibernating in the ground in that section and then attacking your plants again for the next year. And also for those heavy feeding plants, you also want to move them. That way that soil can replenish, or that whatever nutrients that those plants have added back into the soil, some other plant can take advantage of that. Does anyone have any questions before I move to this next section? Oh, I just got a reminder. Also, remember if you are entered, if you comment, you're entered into the Rooted in Melanin seed giveaway. So don't forget to drop your comments below and let us know that you're watching. And definitely give us your questions. Um, After I've gone through all that, we want to say I've probably already reviewed some of these tips here, but how do we go about actually creating biodiversity and companion planning, um, properly preparing and caring for our soil, and doing proper plant spacing? So, what we want to do is you want to choose plants that are well adapted or bred for your region. I want to say the extension service has great resources in order to help you with that information. We're in Zone 8 Alpha, and depending on what part of Central Texas you're in, you may also be in 8 Bravo. Um, and I can also share with some of you guys planning guides or planning calendars that is specific for our planning zone, which is 8 Alpha and 8 Bravo. Um, and shopping at local or regional nurseries and seed banks will also get you plants that are well adapted or bred for our particular area. Um, I do have a list of local, not only nurseries but also seed banks. Uh, three that I want to mention. There are Wilhite Seeds. They're here in Texas. Um, there's Wild Seed Farms. They're out of Fredericksburg. I'm not being paid by them, by the way. These are just people I tend to use. And then I found another one. I think it's called Native American Seed Company. I can drop the link in later on if you guys are interested in either one of those seed companies. Another nursery that's local. Um, I think it's called Native Texas. I just got an email from them this morning. Let's see if I can find it here. I actually got an email. I think it was from Native Texas Nursery. They're located just off of I think like Weberville Road. It's not that far from here. Can't remember. It's in between Manor and Coda, but they have all native Texas plants. And matter of fact, a lot of the local nurseries, such as Green and Growing, they get their plants from this wholesale nursery. And if you have a wholesale license or something like that, you can actually pick up plants from that nursery. Tata, yes, I will post the seed company information. I will have to get on, if I can find it. I do have a list on my computer inside that I can post that from. Um, Second thing that we want to do, we want to arrange our plant spacing using guides. Like I said, the seed pack and info and our garden planners. What I do have is I actually have the square foot gardening book, and I've used it to try and plan some of my gardens over the past year or so, especially since I've arrived here. And it actually tells you. I don't know if you can see that, like how many plants. You can either have visuals, or it tells you how many plants you can put inside a square foot space. Per plant type. Um, I used it. I stuck to the plan exactly. I think last year. This year, I'm a little bit more familiar with how to space some of my plants. So I've been freestyling with it a little bit more, reading CPAC and info and planning accordingly. But if you have any questions, or if you want to link up at some point, and I could screenshot you some of the garden plans that are in here, um, I will do that. But like I said, this is copyrighted information, so I would definitely not charge you for that. I don't want those type of problems. Um, but gardeners sharing information with each other, that's the core of what we're trying to do here. Um, The next principle is to try and reduce our water usage in order to. I'm sorry, I'm outside, so I'm getting visitors. Um, in order to reduce our water usage, this goes along with using plants that are well adapted for your area, but also heavy mulching and composting. Because what that mulch and that compost does is the compost has organic matter that absorbs the moisture and holds that moisture and releases it slowly out to your plants. And then the heavy mulch keeps that moisture from evaporating out into the atmosphere, especially here in Texas. It gets hot, so you want to put down put that compost in the soil that's full of organic matter, and then mulch it. You mulch it, then you mulch it some more. Then you add some compost, and then you mulch it some more. As long as your plants are doing well and they're not being burdened, then compost and mulch, and use locally acquired materials. You can get wood chips from Austin Resource Recovery. You can use shredded yard waste. What I did at one point when I was first getting these gardens started here, I got on Nextdoor and I asked people for their yard waste. I know that depending on what you're using, you got to be careful because some people do use heavy chemicals on their in their yards. But I got yard waste and I put it in a pile and I just let it sit and break down. You could do that. You can get spent coffee grounds. You can get spent coffee grounds from. You can get them from Starbucks. They have a thing. I think it's a grounds to garden or something like that, or grounds for your garden. Usually, if you walk in, be like, "Hey, do you have any spent grounds?" and they'll show you a little bucket with a sticker on it, and they have it all nice and packaged up in the silver mylar bags that you can carry out to your car and put in your garden, or use it to make compost. Um, there are several coffee brewers here in town. For instance, I've been using Third Coast Brewery. I think they're off of either Congress or First, and they brew several times a week, and they put out a large amount of coffee grounds and coffee chaff. It's basically the coffee bean coverings, and the coffee bean chaff. That's really good as mulch. Um, so you can get that. There are also a ton of beer breweries, like local breweries here in Austin, um, like beer breweries. You can get the spent brewery grains. Most of these places, if you contact them or if you just stop by, if they have brewed that day, then they will. Most places will freely give you the brewery grains. You can use that either in your compost or you can just use it on your garden and let it break down. Um, it's an excellent mulch because it not only acts as a mulch, but it can also act as a compost. And then horse manure. There are a ton of people as well who raise horses here. I think down off of Palmer, just I think it's Palmer and Harris Branch. There's a huge, looks like a horse farm, and it's got cows. They usually have a huge pile. The thing looks like it's about 8 feet tall of cow and horse manure. I'm sure if you stop by and ask the farmer, they'll give you some of that horse manure for free because a lot of times these farmers are trying to get this stuff off their hands. Some farmers use it and spread it across their fields, but others don't use that technique. So they need ways to move uh, that waste. It's a waste product for them. Move that waste product off of their property. So it just requires a little bit of extra networking Um, but going out there and getting those free, local, and sustainable materials for your garden. Um, and that moves into using mixed soil mediums according to your zone's demands. Like I said, here in Central Texas, especially over here where I am, um, we have a clay soil, but also it gets pretty hot. So we want to be able to create a soil medium that retains moisture. Um, so you want to keep that in mind, that whatever soil medium that you use, you want to have something that's going to retain moisture, because when this Texas heat hits that soil, it's going to evaporate most moisture, a lot of the moisture that's in there. So you want to have something that retains a lot of moisture. Also, you want to have a mulch that's going to protect your soil and protect your plant roots. Um, a lot of the plants, they'll be stressed during the day, but if their roots are protected and there's still a lot of moisture in there, once that sun goes down, you'll see your plants revive in the evening, and you'll usually see them perk back up in the evening, and then in the mornings you'll see that your plants almost look like they came back to life. Um, and as far as watering, I use what I call ebb and flood watering. I'll water really, really heavy at one point, and then I want water for a while. So I I usually cause it to rain. And what I say by that, usually whenever I get into the point where I'm flooding my garden, um, it'll also rain. So what happened this past week? I flooded my garden beds, and that night it rained. So I probably want water again for another 7 days or so, or maybe not in between them, because it's been raining almost every single day. But what I try and do is I flood my beds, and then I want water again for at least 7 days, 7 to 10 days. And like I said, I call that ebb and flood watering. Um, then finally, um, even with doing all of these different things, you want to have the acceptance of um, intermittent failure. Sometimes you're going to fail. Sometimes something's not going to work. But what I want to encourage you to do is, if it didn't work this way, try it another way. For instance, if you planted something over here and it didn't work, try planting it over here and see if it works. Because sometimes you may have just put a plant in the wrong spot, and it just couldn't. It just didn't have the right level of maybe sunlight, the right type of soil, or something like that. So try that. You know, if you fail, get back up and try again, and just be patient. Be patient. Nature, it takes time. So, and it takes also time to gain sometimes the experience to figure out what the best practices are. And that's basically what I've been trying to go over. Best practices for in your garden. And I'm about to get a little bit more into the biodiversity. We're going to go over a companion planting chart. Um, and then after this is over, I'm going to start dropping some of the links and attaching some of the other resources to this chat. Um, that's it. I have this. I hope you can see it. This chart is a companion planting chart. For instance, let's see if I can find tomatoes. I have a different one here. It's a little bit more simplified, but tomatoes. I know everyone tries to grow tomatoes. Um, okay, wait. Let me go back. I missed the question. Okay, Marcus said, "How long is heavy watering for you?" Honestly, Marcus, heavy watering for me is, like I said, ebb and flood. I will water until there's a layer of water on top of the soil, and then I stop, uh, and I let that drain through. Once I get that small layer of water on top of the soil, then I stop. And like I said, I'll do that once, and then I may not water again for at least 7 to 10 days. if not longer. I've actually not actively watered my plants at some point, especially my in-ground plants, for maybe a couple weeks, because that goes with how I water and then whatever nature provides for me. So if it rains in between the time that last time I watered, I may not water for even longer period, just depending on environmental factors. If uh, if it's rained and the plants are doing well, then I may not water. But if it rained and then it suddenly gets really, really hot and I notice that my plants are being stressed, then I'll go ahead and water those plants again. And I also usually water kind of heavy after I top fed the soil. So if I top feed the soil with like a dry or granular fertilizer, then I'll water heavy along with that as well. So I hope I answer your question. Um, Now back to the companion chart. I know everyone tries to grow likes to grow tomatoes. Everybody likes tomatoes, especially homegrown tomatoes are so much better than store bought tomatoes. I hear everyone talk about a lot that they go to the store, get a tomato or some other type of vegetable, and it tastes like nothing. Um, but you get a tomato that's been homegrown, and it has a much different flavor. Um, so some of the plants that you can companion plant with tomatoes to create biodiversity are cabbage, um, cabbage, carrot, celery, onion, and mint. You want to avoid corn and fennel being close to your tomato plants because they are apparently bad companions. Um, but also, they say that you can also plant basil close to your tomato plants, and it provides your tomatoes with a great flavor. Um, and the purpose of these companion plants, like I stated before, it not only provides a natural pest deterrent, but it also, some of these plants in their roots, they exchange nutrients. And they also, certain plants return certain nutrients to the soil uh, that are beneficial for the other plants. Um, like I said, this chart, both of these will be in the presentation that I'm going to attach to, I'm going to drop into the group later on. Uh, Now I'm going to just take questions, and if anyone has any questions, I'll try and answer them to the best of my ability. Uh, a lot of my information, like I said, it's coming from either 30 years experience or from um, what I have here, square foot gardening, uh, gardening for the zombie apocalypse, which is not really about the zombie apocalypse, but it's really about homesteading principles and gardening just in case of some type of societal collapse, which is kind of what we're dealing with right now. Uh, Daily life, as we're familiar with it, has been interrupted. So being able to plan for those type of situations is what this book is about. And then the other book, I don't have it in hardback, but it's the One Straw Revolution. Um, I got my copy on from Barnes and Nobles. Let's see if I can pull that up real quick. Give me one moment. So while we're waiting for this to download, if anyone has any questions or any other comments, I'd be more than happy to answer these. Man, I just realized it's been 46 minutes. I thought this was only going to take 30. Um, Okay, that's it. One Straw Revolution by Masanobu Fukuoka. Um, he was a Japanese farmer who used who basically revolutionized natural farming. Um, like I said, I found it on Barnes and Nobles, and there was a gentleman from I think he's from Ohio. His uh, his YouTube channel is called One Yard Revolution. He actually inspired a lot of ways that well, in between his this book and some of his videos, inspired a lot of my farming that I've been or gardening that I've been doing over the past, excuse me, 2 to 3 years. What is something a beginner gardener can start growing now for the spring and summer months? Um, um, a beginner gardener. Something I found recently that I found in a lot of um, local nurseries is oh my god, I just had a Malabar spinach. It's a hot weather variety. It grows like a vine. The leaves are a little bit thick, and but once you cook them down, like I've cooked them down with greens before, and they taste pretty good with greens. Um, and they seed really fast. They grow really, really well in the warm weather, and they don't require a whole lot of water. Um, so if you can get a hold of a Malabar spinach plant, that is that'll be a really helpful plant for a beginner gardener. And also, like I said, even a non-determinate tomato or a cucumber is also a great plant. Um, but leafy greens. Leafy greens are a great plant for beginner gardeners because they're easy to grow. Sometimes they don't really take a lot of care. Um, Leafy lettuces don't mind their feet being wet, being that if you happen to overwater it, you know, a lettuce won't die on you from root rot. And especially if you're growing it inside in a pot or something, that's a great plant to grow inside because then you can just go, you can pick a little bit of some leaves off, create a salad, and move on with that. Also, herbs. Um, Herbs are some of the best plants for beginner gardeners because most herbs will grow in just about any type of condition with most with any kind of lighting. Um, so herbs, like I said, Malabar spinach, indeterminate tomatoes. That way you don't have to try and worry about pruning the tomatoes properly. You can let it grow as long as you're keeping it fed and watered. It's going to grow. It's going to probably produce fruit, as well as cucumbers. And like I said, Malabar spinach because it's a warm weather variety. It's from a tropical zone, and most of the varieties that you can find here in nurseries are have already adapted to our area, so they grow really, really well. Okay. Any other questions? Hey, and I want to mention one more time. If you place any comments, made any comments in the comment section, you'll be automatically entered into the Rooted in Melanin seed giveaway. So if you have any questions, or if you just want to say thank you for the Q&A, you can do that. But if you comment, you're automatically entered. And I've been Wes from Force Gardening, and that's it for my presentation. I'm here for uh, questions and comments. So, how do we know if our plants are bush or determinate varieties? Um, well, I found on a lot of the tags, whenever you buy the plants, that they'll tell you whether or not it's determinate or indeterminate. Sometimes if you look, you can actually look up the variety, like what I have back here. Uh, I have Champion Twos and Celebrities I bought from HEB. Uh, Sometimes you can actually Google, like if it's not actually on the tag of the plant that you bought, when you got it from the nursery or from the grocery store, as with the HEB brands varieties, then sometimes you can actually Google those varieties because they're widely known or widely they're popular enough so that you can actually find information about them online and determine whether or not they're indeterminate or determinate. And I think I am missing some. Tanya Rogers, you said you've been looking for Malabar spinach but can't find it anywhere. If you can give me a location to drop off the plant, because like I said, I don't do personals. I will not meet anyone in person. But if you say, hey, drop off this plant at this location, then I can drop you off a seedling at that location. Um, I have from my plant last year, I now have small seedlings popping up all over my yard in places that I don't want them to be. So I would be happy to share a Malabar spinach seedling with you. Yeah, I see. Not all of the questions were coming up on the live stream. So I'm gonna go back through. I'm also on my phone here to try and go back and answer everyone's questions that I may have missed because it didn't show up on the screen during the live stream. Um, Give me one moment so I can scroll through these real quick. I'm not sure if I answered you, Tata, but yes, I will post the seed company information uh, in the comments on the live stream after we're done. Oh, Lisa, you said at what point before or after planting seeds would you mulch? I would wait until, for me, I would wait until my plants showed their first set of true leaves, and I'll put a uh, light mulch around the plants. Um, but I wouldn't put it too close up to the stems just in case some of that mulch, especially if it's the heavy wood chip mulch, some of that fell over on the seedling. I wouldn't want that to either kill the seedling or to hinder its growth in its entirety. Uh, how long did you let your yard trimming sit? From Tata. Um, Actually, the yard trimmings that I collected from my neighbors, um, they are still sitting. They are at the bottom of that pile that I was talking about, where I have the two miniature windrows. I have not placed that on my garden bed yet. I've been adding stuff to that pile for a while, and I probably won't touch that pile until beginning of this winter when I start renewing my beds. So by that time, most of that stuff will have been in that pile and breaking down for about a year. Uh, so, it's broken down, it's decomposed. I'm at a slope, so hopefully some of if anything had any heavy chemicals or anything on it, most of that have most of that is washed off into the green belt that's behind my house, uh, or at least away from that soil that I'm getting ready to use, or has been locked up in the clay because there's clay soil underneath that. Um, Okay, I answered Marcus Griggs. I answered the heavy watering question for you. I hope I answered that for you. If you have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to revisit that. But it's something beginning with. We already answered that. Okay, I think I've answered everyone's questions. Okay, yes, Tanya, if you can do that, that would help. And then when I get a chance, I will definitely I would drop that plant at your driveway and then send you a message and let you know that it's there. Or if you have a ring doorbell or something like that, then I can hit the bell. But like I said, at this point, what we have going on, it's not safe to do personals, and I have a high risk individual in my household, so we definitely are taking extra precaution and trying not to, and maintaining our social distancing. Um, I believe that's it. Lisa, did you have anything that you wanted to share that you want me to broadcast out to everyone before we end the live stream? Yes, I saw the question about the Malabar spinach. I think. Oh wait, hold on. I'm not sure, Miss Lockett. I'm not sure how to pronounce your first name, but would I consider lemongrass plant high maintenance? For me, no. I use it mostly as an ornamental. I haven't used it. I know some people use the shoots. I do have two pretty large plants out in front of my house. Like I said, that I use as ornamentals, and sometimes I use it for. I've actually started making smudges with it to bind my smudges, but other than that, I haven't noticed that it's been a high maintenance plant. Not for me. It's not for my uses. And I believe, I'm sorry, everyone. I'm not sure if you can still hear me, but it seems everyone's starting to do their yard, so it's getting really loud here. So, if you have any questions, I'm going to end the live video because it seems that both of my neighbors have decided to start doing their yards now, and it's getting pretty loud. Um, so, if you have any questions, do drop them in the comments, and I will do my best to answer them later.